Today we're going to talk about learning to walk in the assurances of God's promises. And we need to look at that from the standpoint of a couple of different things. If we're going to walk in the assurances of God's promises, we also have to walk in his heavenly will. You can't have his promises if we're not going to walk in his heavenly will, because that's who the promises are really made for, his children. And we're told that if we live in his heavenly will, we are his children. And that's the key that we have to have. So if we are walking in his heavenly will, and what does it say in the second part of the Lord's Prayer? Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Well, that's what we have to start with. So if we're bringing the heavenly will of God to earth in our daily life, then that's the assurances that we will have the promises of God, because that's the desire of our heart. Because you can't really fake living in the heavenly will of God if it's not part of your being. You can't say, I'm living in his heavenly will, and then go out and have a hamburger, because that requires suffering and death. So we have to look at what it means. And the world doesn't want to do that. And maybe that's why we're seeing so few of God's promises for the whole of this world. Because very few people, relatively few, because there's a lot of people that are living in his heavenly will, but when you compare it to the population of the earth, it's relatively few, are really walking in his heavenly will. Most people are walking in the worldly will, including clergy. And the clergy falsely teach their congregations to do the same thing, good or bad. But they call worldly ways acceptable and sometimes good when they're not. And that's the key. So if we're going to walk in the assurances of his promises, then we have to comply on the other side, don't we? If we don't live in what he wants, we can't go against God's will and expect to get his promises. It's like the same, if you're not going to do the work that you're hired to do in a job, you're going to get fired. Well, why should God say, don't do what I want you to do and give you the promises? It doesn't work that way. We have to be willing to live in God's heavenly will. And when we do, we're walking in the assurances of his promises. Amen.